The world of Monster Hunter is a place of wonder and beauty. Throughout the years, Capcom has taken us to a wide variety of interesting and memorable locations, inhabited by their stellar cast of monsters. But one aspect of the world building that many are not as familiar with is the actual shape of the world. Where are all of these locations in relation to each other? What are their histories and cultures? What does the world map of Monster Hunter actually look like? Mapping the world of Monster Hunter is a surprisingly difficult task, and one that I have personally attempted many times in the past. So, I decided to, this time, give you the lore of Monster Hunter's world and locations while speaking to you directly like this. This way, I can explain sources and assumptions more clearly than I could with my usual documentary style. The top left corner of this video will be dedicated to displaying which book or source my info comes from, so keep an eye on it if that stuff interests you. Strap in and get comfortable as we explore the lands of Monster Hunter. Now, the reason that mapping Monster Hunter is so difficult is because we really do not get a lot of concrete information on where things are. The latest, most up-to-date world map we got for the series as a whole was in Hunter's Encyclopedia 2 back in 2006, with a small update to it being made in Hunter's Encyclopedia G in 2009. This means that our newest source for the Monster Hunter map is, statistically speaking, older than some of you watching this right now. This is also one of only 3 labeled world maps we have. There is an earlier map that came with the first line of ecology encyclopedias, which focused on Monster Hunter 1 only, and then there is the new world map in Monster Hunter World, which only shows the new continent in isolation. Unfortunately, this is all that we get in terms of direct, canon information about the shape of the world. But this is better than nothing. So let's start by constructing our own world map from what we have. We do know the general shape of the world, which is split into the old and new worlds. Do note that we do not know how far away the two worlds are, what direction the new world is in comparison to the old world, or how they relate to each other in size. What you see here is just a way for me to display both places on one screen. So we got this world with around 8 landmasses, some of which we can name. The New World continent and the hinterlands together comprise the New World, and are where Monster Hunter World and Iceborne take place. Moving on to the Old World, this small southern continent here is called Aya, and has only been mentioned by name a single time in all of the books. It is described as a mysterious land, where different tribal groups were united by powerful rulers. Another place that has only been mentioned once is Akura, which is this northern wedge right here. It's said to be a frigid land with extreme weather changes, where powerful monsters gather. The large eastern continent, meanwhile, is named Fonron, and unlike the previous 2 landmasses, we know for a fact that we have been here in the games, but more on that later. Lastly, there are 2 islands whose names we know. Over in the New World, this here is Origin Isle, where Iceborne's final fight against Shara Ishvalda takes place. Then, south of Fonron, we have this crescent moon-shaped land called Shiki. We are told that this island nation produces excellent blacksmiths. This is another place that we get to visit in one of the games, and we'll talk about that at a later point. This leaves us with 3 unnamed landmasses. 2 of them, the western and northern ones, are never addressed in any book or game text that I am aware of. Some fans believe that the western continent might actually be the New World, but we'll get to that and why I disagree with it when we discuss the 5th generation. This 3rd unnamed continent is, ironically, the one we know the most about, as this is where most of the games in the series take place. I call it the Central Continent, but that is not its name, it's just a descriptor. You will sometimes see it referred to as the Current Continent in some of the books, but that also seems to be more of a descriptor than a name. This land is separated into regions, with many varied climate zones and biomes. Finally, one more thing that we know is that the equator of the Monster Hunter world is here, as it is shown explicitly in the early Gen 1 map. Because that map only shows the old world, we do not know how the equator relates to the new world. So this is the general shape we are working with, sticking purely to officially confirmed information. This was very general, but we'll explore everything in much more detail in the future. Since the newest map was updated in 2009, we actually also know the locations of many towns and hunting grounds, up to Monster Hunter Freedom Unite. For now, let's focus on locations from the series' 1st generation of games, meaning from Monster Hunter 1 to Monster Hunter Freedom. Much of the 1st generation of Monster Hunter takes place near the northwestern tip of the Central Continent, an area called the Shrade region. This place is the leftover shadow of the powerful Kingdom of Shrade, an old empire that is said to have ruled vast swaths of the world in the past. But today, Shrade is split into East and West Shrade, who have a history of bitter rivalry. Feudal disputes and political intrigue flare up the tempers of these 2 nations periodically, but it does not escalate into anything more serious. While the West is fertile and prosperous, the East is rough and cold. The region is surrounded by the massive Hinmerun mountain range, which stretches all across this northwestern tip of the continent. On the border between East and West Shrade stands a neutral zone, established around the once renowned capital of the Lost Shrade Kingdom, Castle Shrade. This was, once upon a time, a prestigious capital from which the Kingdom of Shrade stretched into the furthest corners of the known territories. Today, only little remains of its legendary glory. Its walls crumbled, its cannons eroded, its banners torn and rotten. To the people of the current day, Castle Shrade is a place crawling with monsters, a neutral zone no one is allowed to enter. The halls once patrolled by armored warriors and gardens admired by delegate princes have given way under the weight of history. No one knows what exactly happened here. The Kingdom of Shrade simply vanished about 1,000 years ago. But in ancient murals and archaic folk songs, a particular belief about Shrade's demise emerges over and over again. That the kingdom was, for reasons lost to time, burned to ash by a single black dragon. This event, as well as its perpetrator, is often called Fatalis, translated by scholars as Battle of Fate. Within the world of Monster Hunter, this is considered mere myth, But for us, it's a different story altogether, isn't it? Aside from the zone around Castle Shrade, both the East and West Shrade nations are considered civilized regions, areas of the world where humanity prospers and monsters are only sighted rarely. In fact, a citizen of either Shrade nation is highly unlikely to ever see a monster with their own eyes. They know they exist, but they're not exactly in a position where they're going to encounter them ever. Think about how you know that giraffes exist, but have probably never encountered one in the wild. As a result, the deeds of monster hunters exist here largely as exaggerated stories sung by bards. Such stories tend to take place in the south of the region, where the civilized region of West Shrade gives way to another kind of land. A frontier zone. Areas of the world where monsters are abundant and reign supreme, and where human influence is limited to isolated towns and settlements. Here, in the South Shradian frontier, stands a city of hunters. Minegard, the online hub town from Monster Hunter 1. Built into the harsh rocky landscape overrun by powerful monsters, one would not expect Minegard to thrive. It lies far away from the wealthy center of West Shrade, and the soil around it is unsuitable for farming. And yet, it stands tall, its thorn walls and well-maintained cannons keeping monsters away from an ever-growing citizenry. The reason Minegard has been able to exist is its reliance on the one resource exclusive to it: monster materials. Since the settlement offers an entry point into the wild frontier, many hunters gather here, bring with them spoils from their quests that they sell to local markets. Monster materials form the basis for many commodities, and as the demand for such commodities grows, so too does Minegard's economy. Before long, the value that Minegard's existence brought to the Shrade region was undeniable, and monster hunting as a profession took off properly. That is also why Minegard is the headquarters of the Shradian Hunters Guild. As a refresher, there is no one centralized Hunters Guild as far as we know, but rather multiple local guilds that work together closely as a conglomerate. While characters often talk of the Hunters Guild, that is just an umbrella term that includes all the different local branches that share information and quests among each other, a network that includes the guild here in Minegard. But while Minegard is said to have popularized monster hunting, the origin of this line of work is actually suggested to be further south. Nestled between a small branch of the mountain range, we find the first ever village seen in the series, Kokoto. This small village sits near Mount Kokoto and serves as a microcosm of a hunting society. Small huts to accommodate novice hunters stand vis-a-vis a modest market, where hunting tools and gear can be purchased and commissioned. It is a self-sufficient community that revolves around monster hunting. They are led by their village chief, an old Wyverian with an inexhaustible expertise in all matters of monster hunting. Many believe that he must have been quite a fierce hunter in his youth himself. The excellent hunting environment and welcoming community causes a regular stream of young hunters spending time here, and Kokoto thrives as a result. The town is small and rustic, but not opposed to modernization. In recent years, they have added a farm and a bar to their establishments. Kokoto is also famous for its legendary Hero of Kokoto. This story is, in many ways, the foundational myth of monster hunting as a lifestyle, and over the years, the details of this event have become warped and varied by various narrators. Historical facts tell us that long ago, Mount Kokoto was beset by a terrible, one-horned wyvern that threatened the people in the region. A band of 5 warriors, led by a young wyverian, stood up to the creature and fought it valiantly. But the wrath of the monster incurred a heavy toll. One member of the band, the beautiful fiancée of the wyverian leader, lost her life in the battle. The band retreated, only for the young wyverian to face the wyvern again, this time by himself. Against all odds, the young hunter vanquished the beast by himself, earning himself the title Hero of Kokoto. It is this story that inspired people all over to take up arms and make their living as monster hunters. As a myth, it has also inspired many of the rules and regulations that hunters' guilds impose. For example, any hunting party must not have more than 4 members, as the 5th is surely to die a tragic death, as a hero's love once did. Quick side note. There seems to always be some confusion on if the monster that the hero fought was a monoblos or a Laoshan lung. As far as the books are concerned, it calls it a one-horned wyvern, using the exact same title as the official title used for the monoblos. It also uses this kanji, which in the Monster Hunter series is generally reserved for wyverns, while elder dragons get this one instead. This pattern hasn't always been consistent though, to be fair. But, based on Monoblos's role in Monster Hunter 1, the usage of its title, and the kanji, I'll say that the hero of Kokoto probably fought a Monoblos. So as you can see, the official sources do give us enough info to definitively place the 3 town-like locations from the first game. Trust me, this is very much a luxury compared to some later cases. Moving on, we even know the rough locations and some additional lore of the hunting grounds that we visit in the first generation. South of Kokoto, one enters a place called the Arcolis region. The exact borders of this area are unknown, but it roughly stretches from just south of Kokoto to around the western tip of the continental lake. This is a mild and temperate zone, and it is here where the Forest and Hills hunting ground is. If you've only ever played Monster Hunter Generations Ultimate, you may know this place as the Verdant Hills. While we don't know exactly where in this region the hunting ground is located, Ecology Encyclopedia Monster Hunter 1 Volume 1 mentions that hunting grounds tend to become tougher and restricted to more experienced hunters the further they are from established settlements. Considering that the Forest and Hills map is generally a very early game area, it's plausible to assume that it's somewhat close to Kokoto. This hunting ground is a lush and vibrant land, where monsters of many different kinds gather. Considering that this is the original hunting ground of the series, we do not actually get a lot of concrete info on this area, from the books at least. One thing we do, however, know is the actual name of the location. These are the Shilton Hills, which merge into the Silkor Forest. If we keep going south, we reach this land bridge here that connects the northwest, southwest, and central chunks of the continent. The southwestern coast is covered in a tropical forest, which is where the Old Jungle Hunting Ground is located. This place also gets a name in the books. It is called the Metape Rainforest. The variety of plant life and abundant fish species make it a paradise for many monsters, including Piscine wyverns that feed on aquatic prey. There are also fishing villages here, which often clash with local monsters such as the Yankutku. As we head further south, we reach this massive southern peninsula. This is an arid region and is where many of Monster Hunter's deserts are located. In the middle, pretty much exactly at the equator, we have the Old Desert, which younger players might know as the Dunes map from Monster Hunter 4U and GU. This vast sea of sand is famous for its rare desert plants, as well as the many underground waterways that allow monsters such as Plesioth to travel here. Despite being a region with extreme temperatures, hunter activity is said to have increased here, and Encyclopedia 4 even mentions that there might be efforts to open parts of the area up for civilian activities, such as tourism. However, the presence of powerful monsters makes such endeavors difficult. Like the previous areas, the Old Desert also gets a name in the books. It is officially called the Day Desert. For now, instead of going further south, let's move back to the north and go to the northern shore of the continental lake. This lake, too, has a name. It is called the Geokruk Sea. Note that this is just my localization of the letters used here, and you could very well translate the name differently, but this is what I'm going with for now. The prefix Geo is maybe most interesting, because you could localize it with various other spellings in English as well. The reason I went with Geo here is that this fragment also appears in the name of the mining town you visit in Monster Hunter stories, where it is officially localized as Geofulcrite. So I figured I'd try to stay consistent with the series' confirmed localization precedent here, which is why I translated this fragment as Geo in this and some upcoming names. To the north of the lake lies the old swamp hunting ground that appeared first in Monster Hunter 1. It is called the Geoterrado Wetlands in the books, and is characterized by near endless rain. It is said to have been ignored by humans in the past due to how unpleasant and inhospitable of an area it is, but it became quite interesting to various authorities and guilds after it was discovered that the humid conditions promoted the growth of unique and valuable mushrooms. It's also described as an area that large monsters only rarely settle in. The north of the zone has cold caves, which are home to Kezu, as I am sure you know. Now, as we move southeast, we arrive at this small triangular peninsula. Based on the way it is described, this region seems to be called Erude or Elde. I personally prefer the former. This peninsula is said to be almost entirely saturated by volcanic mountain ranges, and it is also in the north of this region where we find the old volcano from Monster Hunter 1. It is a harsh volcanic zone with many rare minerals and ores, and a volcanic research team is said to have been formed to investigate the area. Encyclopedia Reprint mentions that one of their discoveries was that the intense tectonic activity of the region disturbs and aggravates monsters, and makes them more aggressive than they might otherwise be. These are all of the in-game locations from the first generation that we can definitively place. We have in-game towns and hunting grounds covered, but the canon maps give us one more category of location to uncover: towns that are never seen in-game. This is entirely unique to these early maps, and many of these places have only ever been mentioned here once. They are still fascinating to discuss, all the same. If we return to Minegard, and then go directly north, we hit a city called Veld. You may also see this place called Verudo, which is just the phonetic reading of the Japanese spelling, and also valid. It is the largest city of West Schrade, and is described as a fortress city with high walls, powerful cannons, and abundant ballistae. The crown jewel of Veld's military might is an enormous old cannon, said to be the last line of defense should any monsters make it this far into the nation. While one might think it a bustling and thriving place, the books also point out that it suffers a brutal class divide. The rich live in the inner city, protected by Veld's arsenal and infrastructure, while the poor huddle together in the outer city, exposed and neglected. Moving northeast, past Castle Schrade, we find Revel, the capital of East Schrade. Again, you might have seen this location under the name Riveru in previous translations, including ones that I've done. It is said to be a place with long winters and harsh weather conditions, where the use of hot drinks is essentially mandatory. Despite this, Revel is a successful trading hub, and merchants all across East Schrade pass through there using sleds pulled by large herbivore monsters, a sight that is considered characteristic of this town. Revel's most notable feature is its tall watchtower, which many see as a parallel to Veld's massive cannon. By returning to Minegard and then heading south a little, we find another town that we only know from the books, Melchita. This is a fairly new settlement, built around a great lake formed in an ancient meteor crater. Its population consists mostly of hunters stopping by on their way to Minegard, and researchers intrigued by the meteor lake. Next, we push southeast to the western tip of the Geocrux Sea. Here stands a town called Metapetat, a community built from the ground up by monster hunters. Built into a path carved by passing Lao Shan Lung long ago, this village serves as a gateway to the southern hunting grounds, such as the Old Jungle. As it has access to the continental lake, Metapetat also gets a fair bit of trade by sea. Following the shoreline of the Geocrux Sea south and then east, we arrive in Geo Wandreo, the largest city in the frontier zone. Protected by sturdy walls and watchtowers, this trading hub flourishes even in close proximity to powerful monsters, and has become the de facto gateway between East and West. It is described to have a waterfront market suspended onto rafts, and is a place many new technologies are developed in. It is also stated to be the town that introduced Schradian hunters to dual blades. The next town we know of is further south, at the eastern shore of the desert peninsula. This place is called Rexara, and is described as an oasis village. This town serves as an entrance to the deserts in the south, and many hunters pass through it regularly. This is expected to improve Rexara's economy over time, allowing it to grow steadily. While the previous unseen towns got their own little blurbs in the books, this last one is only ever mentioned offhandedly in a paragraph about Erude. Here, somewhere in the north, lies a small village called Nganka. It is said to be a base of operations for hunters questing in the volcanic region, and that it is also a community of highly regarded blacksmiths. It is noted that most active and renowned blacksmiths have traveled to Nganka at some point in their careers. And so, this is what the world map of Monster Hunter looks like at the end of the first generation, based entirely on canonical information given to us in the lore books. This was fairly straightforward, which is not something you should get used to. There are another handful of areas we get definitive locations for in the second generation, but past that, we will have to speculate and theorize. Before we jump into the new stuff, allow me to quickly clarify a few things from the previous episode. I realized that I just dropped this map on you all without really explaining what you're looking at. Specifically, these colored areas I used for hunting ground locations were very fun to draw and look nice, but I realized they could be misleading. So to be perfectly clear, the denoted hunting grounds are not stretched across this entire area, but rather are located somewhere within its confines. We don't tend to get exact placements for hunting grounds, so this is the best way to illustrate this that I have found. Next, when I told you about Kokoto Village, I used a book source to determine that the monster the hero of Kokoto fought in the famous legend was probably a monobloss and not a Lao Shan Lung. However, I have since looked into it further and, surprise, it is actually a little more complicated than that. Quick reminder, in the Japanese version of Monster Hunter, wyverns and elder dragons are both called dragons, but the kanji used to spell their titles is different. It is true that in Hunter's Encyclopedia reprint, the hero is described to have battled a one-horned wyvern, which is spelled the exact same way as the monobloss's official Japanese title. But then, in Monster Hunter Freedom, the story is told using the expression Koryu, or Elder Dragon, instead. Hunter's Encyclopedia 1's telling of the story, meanwhile, describes the fiend by spelling out the English word dragon in katakana, and calls the battle in which the hero's lover dies a dragon conquest or dragon suppression, using the kanji that in Monster Hunter usually denotes elder dragons rather than wyvern. But then, in the Dive to Iceborne book, the most recent source we have, the hero is described to have fought a flying wyvern, and that it was this flying wyvern which caused the death of his lover. So, what is going on here? One possibility is that this is a case of historical confusion. Remember, all of Monster Hunter lore is told from an in-universe perspective, meaning that there is always a possibility of unreliable narrators. The legend of the hero of Kokoto is a popular and old folktale, so perhaps these contradictions are included to emphasize the way a myth like that would be distorted over time as people tell and retell it. Another possibility is that the hero of Kokoto actually fought multiple legendary battles. In the Hunter's Encyclopedia 2 version of the legend, he is first described as facing a one-horned wyvern. But then, when talking about the death of his lover, the book suddenly switches to using dragon in katakana, implying that the hero first fought a monobloss and then later lost his fiancée to a dragon in a separate incident. Feel free to draw your own conclusions on this and let me know in the comments if you want. I also hope you're starting to understand why Monster Hunter lore can be so hard to pin down sometimes. Massive thanks to Shraid Academy, Goji, and Lutyrannus for their help on clarifying this for me. Lastly, I realized that I kept calling the Geocrux Sea a lake in the previous video. The Japanese uses the kanji kai, which tends to denote large bodies of salt water and can be used for seas surrounded mostly by land, such as the Caspian or Mediterranean seas. So the Geocrux Sea is probably more comparable to those than to a lake. No clue why my brain just defaulted to calling it a lake, to be honest. I guess this goes to show why it was a good idea to make this a video series. I get to fact check myself as we go along like this. Right, enough corrections, let's get to the main event now. The second generation of Monster Hunter includes 3 named towns, all of which we get a definitive location for on the Hunter's Encyclopedia 2 map. First off, we head to the southeastern lump of the central continent. Here, on this little western protrusion of the continent, we find Jumbo Village, the single-player town from Monster Hunter DOS. This settlement was created by a young Wyverian with the goal of turning it into a bustling economic center even out here in the far frontier. To do so, he chose a spot with ample access to waterways to hopefully eventually open up a shipyard and seafaring station. The young Wyverian also recruited various experts to his town-building cause: an injured shipwright full of jolly ambition, a retired master blacksmith, an unusually motivated hunting instructor, and more. All this was not just to build a trading hub, but a place that attracts monster hunters, whose exploits and presence would surely benefit the people of the village. Through ingenuity and determination, this Wyverian was driven to weld together a strong community built on hunting and commerce. The plot of DOS thus largely revolves around fulfilling this dream, with every urgent quest essentially being tied to upgrading this village. The area around Jumbo is plentiful, with flora and fauna flourishing aplenty. The village also has a mine, which predates its existence and houses the skeleton of a Laoshan lung. If we now slingshot northwest to the northern shore of the Geocrux Sea, we arrive at what is maybe the most important town in the series, Dundorma, the online hub for Monster Hunter DOS. Carved into a steep mountain valley facing the sea, this large settlement has a long and rich history. Originally established by the indigenous people of the land, Dundorma has stood here for eons, blessed by gentle winds and clear water. It is currently under the watchful protection of its leader, the Great Elder, also called His Immenseness. A descendant of those that first built Dundorma, the Great Elder's leadership has fundamentally marked the city. Long ago, when there was no reliable way to anticipate monster attacks, the people turned to dragon seers, Wyverian experts who used limited means to roughly predict the approach of elder dragons, with varying degrees of success. It was the Great Elder who sent out a summons across the lands, beckoning these seers to Dundorma. Once assembled, the Great Elder united the dragon seers from all over into an organization dedicated to studying and intercepting elder dragons. The Elder Dragon Observation Team, localized officially as the Dragon Watch, as of Monster Hunter Generations Ultimate. Using hot air balloons and carrier birds to survey the land and report back to their headquarters in Dundorma, the Dragon Watch has become a vital part of monitoring the movements of monsters. While their focus was initially on elder dragons, their activities have also led to groundbreaking discoveries regarding just about every monster type, and hunters' guilds all around the world have benefited from their work. Around the time of their creation, the Great Elder also converted Dundorma's Prayer Hall into the Elder Hall, which oversees and organizes hunting operations of the highest caliber. This signaled a cultural shift in Dundorma. It was no longer faith that would ward off against disaster, but the diligent work of hunters and scriveners. This is just one of the many accomplishments made by the Great Elder, which also include the establishment of a standing Guardian Corps, the maintenance of dedicated interception zones for approaching monsters, the stimulation of monster material trade in the region, and much more. For all of these actions and his eons of wisdom, the Great Elder is highly respected by all branches of the Hunters Guild community. While there doesn't seem to be one central power that governs all Hunters Guilds, they do seem to turn to Dundorma and the Great Elder for guidance in times of crisis. If you had to call any one place the capital of monster hunting, it would likely be Dundorma. Today, Dundorma is a bustling city where hunters from all over the lands gather. Markets bloom with commerce, and every day legends are born from the actions of those that pass through Dundorma. Many parts of the city are adorned with red and green decorations, symbols of a faith unique to this region that holds Rathalos and Rathian sacred. Dundorma additionally has a long history of music, with the local diva performing mesmerizing songs in the city's entertainment arena in the evenings. The city is also a natural fortress, surrounded by mountains and fortified by powerful walls and vast arrays of artillery. The people of Dundorma are also uniquely prepared for dire situations. Should an elder dragon approach the city, the citizenry is well able to barricade themselves and allow the resident hunters and guardians to repel the beast without worrying about collateral damage. All in all, in terms of size, prosperity, and prestige, Dundorma simply has no equal. By heading northeast from Dundorma, we eventually reach a mountainous, frigid region. It is here where we find Poke Village, which you may know from Monster Hunter Freedom Unite and Generations Ultimate. Located in an extremely inhospitable area where snow never melts and temperatures never rise, one would not expect this place to thrive. However, Poke benefits from some key luxury exports that have brought it prosperity. A special type of mountain grass that grows only here was found to have powerful medicinal properties when submerged in water, and various mercantile organizations and even hunters' guilds seek it out voraciously. As a result, a small village was able to spring up here, supported by the steady flow of income from this special herb. As hunters' guilds were among the clients that enabled this development, Poke was built with a town hall that doubles as a branch office for hunters' guild affairs. This has ensured steady collaboration and has allowed Poke Village to build various amenities to aid any hunters that pass through. At the back of the village stands the Great Macalite, revered as a symbol of the village. Another unique feature of Poke is their domestication of Popo, local herbivore monsters that are often used as beasts of burden. While this has eased much of the heavy work required to live out in the mountains, it brings with it its own host of challenges. For example, that the fat, idle herds of Popo attract gluttonous monsters such as Tigrex into the vicinity of the village. Another, more mysterious feature of Poke Village is the cave situated near it. For a long time, the cave entrance was sealed off by a thick layer of seemingly permanent frost. Somewhat recently, though, that ice wall collapsed, revealing a truly puzzling sight. An enormous greatsword, much too large to be wielded by anyone, embedded into the stone. Stories have circulated that it belonged to an ancient hero battling a massive monster in the deep snow, but no concrete information remains. What is, however, an undeniable reality is the sword's bizarre property. It is made up of an entirely unknown ore and will, miraculously, regenerate itself if some of the ore is chipped off. This has allowed researchers and hunters to gather small samples of the ore for analysis and crafting, but no notable breakthroughs in understanding the blade's origins have so far been made. That covers us as far as in-game towns go, so let's move on to second generation hunting grounds. If we start at Jumbo Village and then travel northeast, we arrive at this small wedge, which is where the Gen 2 jungle is located. You may also simply know this place as the jungle from Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak. Remember, these colored areas don't show the size of the hunting ground, just a rough look at where the hunting ground may be, since we don't get precise placements like we do for villages. Like many early series hunting grounds, this one also gets a bespoke name in the books, being called the Terosu Jungle. It is a lush and humid environment, where a massive central tree filters rainwater down through its branches and into the lower levels, enabling a diverse and vibrant ecosystem. Many valuable resources, such as special mushrooms, can be found here, guarded by an array of diverse monster species. Maybe most striking, however, are the ancient ruins that saturate the area, especially the north. Underground, a massive ritual hall has been discovered, the purpose of which has been lost to time. While little is known of what kind of civilization once dwelt here and used these ruins, ancient writings and murals have suggested that the culture of Terossu initially worshipped the elder dragon Kushala Daora, later turning on it for unclear reasons and battling it ferociously. Moving on, by heading to Dundorma and then turning northwest, we find ourselves north of the Old Swamp. Here lies the Gen 2 Swamp, which newer players may know as the Marshlands from Monster Hunter Generations Ultimate. The books call this place the Cruptious Wetlands, although you could localize that name a few different ways as well. It is a humid and rainy zone, where the skies seldom clear. The abundance of water sources does, however, promote the growth of flora and fungi, and it's also apparently a popular fishing location for those brave and able enough to venture here. And bravery is indeed necessary. Various species of poisonous plants and mushrooms saturate the area, and at night, their fluids pool in the many puddles of the marsh and mix into a deadly sludge, emitting toxic vapors that spell doom for any that come into contact with them. Despite its seeming roughness, the marshlands do play many vital ecological roles, from water purification to flood control. Next, we head way south, into the desert regions, zooming past even Rekusara and the Old Desert. Down here, we find the Gen 2 Desert, which Hunter's Encyclopedia 2 calls the Sekumea Desert. The name itself is stated to mean dry sea, although we are not told what language it is in. Being further south than the Old Desert, Sekumea experiences much harsher temperatures, scorching during the day and freezing during the night. It is in fact so harsh that hunting activity is entirely forbidden here during the hot season, as the average day temperatures are deadly to humans during that time. All the inhabitants of this region are said to be very aggressive due to the harsh conditions they must endure. Hunter activity has revealed the existence of various oases here, as well as underground lakes that house Piscine wyverns. If we slingshot back northeast to Poke Village, you can see that it is surrounded by mountain ranges. Within one of these ranges to the northwest of the village lies the Snowy Mountains hunting ground. If you perhaps started the series with Monster Hunter Generations Ultimate, you may recognize it as the Arctic Ridge. The books call it the Furahia Mountains, although it's a little unclear if this name refers to just this area or the mountain range as a whole. This frigid environment is made up of tall, bitter cold mountains and slightly warmer, low grasslands. However, the wind gnaws at flesh and skin all the same, making this hunting ground quite inhospitable to humans. In the cold season, it is in fact entirely off limits, as the temperatures fall so low that any hunter would find themselves frozen, stiff, and dead. While various creatures manage to survive in these conditions, it is the Blango and their leader, the Blangonga, that truly thrive in this frozen land. Moving on, we now head down south into the Erude region, where we previously established the existence of a volcanic zone. Here, south of the old volcano, roughly in the center of the peninsula, stands the Gen 2 volcano hunting ground, called the Latio volcano in Hunter's Encyclopedia 2. This barren hellscape holds little life, save for a few shrubs and a handful of monster species such as the Gravios. The reason for that is the intense heat and constantly shifting lava, which threatens to snuff out any unprepared life form. It is a harsh hunting ground reserved only for capable hunters, and is also an area in which elder dragons are sometimes sighted. Aside from that, Latios' most noteworthy features are the rare ores and resources that can be gathered here, if one is courageous enough. Now, for this next hunting ground, we finally get to go to the eastern continent of Fonron. In the south lies the Great Forest, which is called the Batbatum Jungle in the books. The name is actually worth looking at with a bit more detail. While I call it a jungle here, the Japanese expression used here is jukai, made up of the characters for trees and sea, which would make a more literal translation, sea of trees. The name is meant to denote an area completely overrun with vegetation, where trees form a dense green blanket not unlike the surface of the ocean. While I went with Batbatum Jungle on this map, you could also call it the Batbatum Rainforest, Batbatum Overgrowth, etc. Just a cool detail I thought you might appreciate. The Great Forest certainly lives up to its name. Giant trees cover the area, a vast green expanse with every inch covered in flora. Life of all kinds thrives here, as the abundance of large plants creates favorable conditions for all manner of species. Regular rainfall ensures a healthy water cycle, and in the center of the explored zone stands a singular ginormous tree, whose crown appears to be missing. This great tree is home to many different monsters, and even to an indigenous population of Linians. The most infamous species that was discovered here is the Nargacuga, and the Great Forest houses a great variety of them. One interesting fact about this hunting ground is that it actually originates from Monster Hunter Frontier, the MMO that ran from 2007 to 2019. It was later included in Monster Hunter Freedom Unite, making its mainline series debut. So, the last regular hunting ground from the second generation we haven't covered yet is the Ancient Tower, as well as all of its conjoined areas, such as the Forlorn Arena and the Tower Peak. And it is here where we face our first real challenge. There is no concrete confirmation as to where the tower is located. This is very much by design. The tower is meant to be mysterious and hard to pin down, and a part of Monster Hunter DOS's story even revolves around the player searching for old manuscripts to discover its location. So, where do we put it on our map? If we inspect that encyclopedia map more closely, you might notice something interesting. While we don't get an explicit location pin for the tower, we can actually see that a tower is physically drawn onto the map, right here on Fonron, north of the Great Forest. Many of the other hunting grounds also got little map doodles like these, so it is possible that this is meant to indicate the tower's location. Also, this is the lorebook about the game that introduced the tower and gave it story relevance. So would they really add this drawing for no reason? We could probably just place the tower here and call it a day based on this alone, but let's be thorough and review some additional potential evidence. By simply looking around the tower map in DOS, we can see that it borders on some kind of vast forest area, which can also be seen from the top. This forest is briefly discussed in Monster Hunter Law of Ideas 2, an interview collection where various dev team members talk about monsters from Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate and Generations Ultimate, among others. Here, in the section focusing on Molten Tigrex, they mention that the forests surrounding the tower are extremely old and primitive, producing much more oxygen than modern trees, thus nurturing large and powerful creatures such as the Molten Tigrex, which is exclusively fought at the top of the tower. The specific expression used here to describe the forest surrounding the tower is taiko no mori, thick old forest, literally translated. This could be read as a forest that is dense and old, or a forest that is thickly old, that is to say ancient or prehistoric. At least subjectively, this more or less tracks with the way the Great Forest is presented, a dense, untouched land of abundance, centered around a giant tree whose age is unknown. For our next piece of potential evidence, we turn to the Great Forest's crown inhabitant, the Nargacuga. During its debut in Freedom Unite, a big deal was made about it being specifically at home in the Great Forest. The encyclopedia entry on the map spends more time discussing Nargacuga than the area itself, for example. And in Monster Hunter Illustrations 1, a small note attached to some art of the Nargacuga mentions that there are in fact different colorations of it, including a white fur breed. Fast forward to Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate, and we find ourselves fighting a lucent Nargacuga, that is to say, a Nargacuga with partially white fur, exclusively found in one of the tower arenas. When I say exclusive, I really do mean it. Lucent Nargacuga is only fought here, even in Sunbreak, where it is one of very few monsters to be entirely excluded from the randomly generated anomaly quests. So we go from hearing about white Nargacugas potentially existing on Fonron, to then fighting a white Nargacuga subspecies near the tower. I don't think this is a strong enough connection to really say anything definitively by itself, but it is at least an interesting thing to consider. Our final bit of evidence for today, however, I feel is a little stronger. In Monster Hunter DOS, the player must find 3 ancient pages to determine the location of the tower, all of which are found in relation to the Gen 2 jungle. One in the mine in Jumbo Village, which has close ties to the jungle. One at the Jumbo Market feline, who found it during a scampering around the area, and the last one from trading with the Veggie Elder of the jungle. Clearly, the tower holds some kind of connection with this jungle. Now, remember the ruins that litter the jungle. At the northern island, we can see what looks like a destroyed temple and, springing from that structure, various decayed remnants and pillars that seem to indicate that a larger horizontal structure may have once existed here. Potentially a bridge, with its legs still somewhat preserved. And if we reconstruct this bridge roughly, it seems to be going eastward, almost as if it once connected the jungle with Fonron. This would also fit within the general architectural style we see in the tower's forlorn arena, with this massive bridge or aqueduct-like structures stretching all around the place. Seeing it line up like this, it almost feels intentional. Huge thanks to Shraid Academy from the MH Old School forums for bringing this to my attention. We can actually strengthen this connection even further. In Monster Hunter DOS, the player may very rarely see a Yamatsukami appear in the jungle before flying off. Now, coincidentally, if we trace its flight path, it appears the Elder Dragon is flying east. This is relevant because the main area that Yamatsukami is fought in is, you guessed it, the tower. So in this rare encounter, it might be flying towards the tower and towards Fonron. Now, this is where my research originally ended. But while I was editing this video, I was made aware that in Hunter's Encyclopedia 2, Yamatsukami is outright stated to have been sighted in Fonron. And since the main arena for Yama in DOS is the tower, this is another big piece of potential evidence. Big thanks to Goji and Zugzwang for pointing this out to me. Considering all of what we have just discussed, from the descriptions of the Great Forest to the connections with Lucent Nargacuga and the ruins in the jungle, I feel comfortable enough placing the tower and its adjacent maps here on Fonron, as it is drawn on the encyclopedia map. But you don't have to agree with me. Feel free to theorize further in the comments. For now, note the red mark I put next to the tower's name. This indicates that this is a speculated location and not canonically confirmed, just so we can differentiate between the stuff that's certain and the stuff we theorize into existence. And so, this is what our map looks like at the end of the second generation. This was, again, mostly straightforward with the exception of the tower. Get used to theorizing like this, because from this point onwards, nearly nothing has a confirmed location, and we'll have to get our theorist goggles on to make any further progress. Today, we look at all the locations introduced in the third generation, which represents the first major hurdle to this video series. Monster Hunter 3 was in many ways a kind of reboot, reimagining the series' style and mechanics in ways that still echo on today. Most crucially for us, this was also the point at which Monster Hunter began being more coy about its world building and lore, becoming more reluctant to openly confirming connections between pieces of information, and overall erring on the side of ambiguity. This also means that from this point onwards, nearly no town or hunting ground has a confirmed location on this map. It's all up to us, using incidental details from our list of sources and deductive reasoning. Before we jump in, however, I have a small correction to make. In the very first episode, I told you about a city named Riveru in Japanese, that is here in the Schrade region. Like with the other places that don't have an official localization, I did my best to construct a possible English name for it, eventually landing on Rivel. Well, turns out it does in fact have an official English name. In Monster Hunter Freedom Unite, the player can obtain a treasure item named Liberstone in English. But if we look at the Japanese, Riverubi, we can see that it includes the name Riveru. Thus, Riveru's official English name is in fact Liber. Thanks to Nu Udra from the Monster Hunter Wiki Discord for this find. Luckily, that is already it for corrections. We got lots of work to do today, so let's start with towns. First up is Moga Village, a small fishing hamlet that serves as the offline town for Monster Hunter 3 and 3 Ultimate. Located off the coast of a deserted island and suspended on wooden rafts, this village houses many different people, from humans to Wyverians to Linians to even the elusive Sea Folk, a sapient race of humanoids with varying degrees of aquatic adaptations. It is a joyful and pleasant community that appreciates the bounty of nature. Historical sketches reveal that Moga Village has undergone various changes over the years, changing its layout quite frequently. Guild scholars believe this is likely the result of common disasters such as earthquakes and tsunamis, changing the terrain and destroying the village periodically, forcing regular rebuilding. And rebuild they do. The Mogans have watched over this place for time untold, under the guidance of a guardian clan. That clan's current head is the Moga chief, once a monster hunter, now an old man enjoying the sea and nurturing the next generation. His years of experience and wealth of connections within the Hunters Guild ensure Moga Village's safety and prosperity. In the waters beneath the village, ancient ruins stand as the last remnants of a past Mogan civilization. As far as mapping goes, Moga is kind of tricky. We know it's directly adjacent to the deserted island hunting ground, so by figuring out its location, we'll be killing 2 Gargoyle with 1 barrel bomb. However, there are no direct statements as to where the island is, which means we have to scour the oceans. Hunter's Encyclopedia 3's entry on the deserted island states, The deserted island is located in the middle of the ocean. Those who visit this island from the continent will be amazed by its many plants and animals that they have never seen before. This implies that A. Moga Island is not near any coast and is a true ocean island, and B. that it is still possible to visit it with some ease from the continent. While we aren't told which continent this is referring to, this expression usually means the Old World main continent in the Monster Hunter books. Now, if we look at our map of the Old World, there are a few islands indicated on it. It is of course entirely possible that Moga Island is too small to be drawn in here, but that would not be a very fun answer, now would it? So let's assume that Moga Island is in fact one of the islands depicted here. This far east crescent is Shiki, so we can immediately disregard it. We can also broadly disqualify all of these small northern islands. Moga is both depicted and described as having a mild climate year-round, so there is absolutely no way that it is north of Poke. This essentially leaves us with three options. This western island off the coast of Shrade, this tiny island on the eastern coast, and any of the islands in this southern island cluster. In Monster Hunter Generations Ultimate, the Argosy captain can sometimes appear in Kokoto, where he will say, "But my ship, Argosy, was attacked near Kokoto here, which far from Moga." This seems to disqualify the western island, as it is quite close to where we know Kokoto is. This leaves us with two options. Now, remember that the very first world map of Monster Hunter also indicates this world's equator, which is down here. Looking at this, the eastern island also seems too far north to have the kind of year-round pleasant climate that Moga is described to have, so I feel comfortable disqualifying it due to this. The only option we are left with is thus this island cluster here, south of Erude. Which of these islands is Moga is honestly a complete guessing game at this point. Moga Island does need to be somewhat sizable, as the variety of monsters that can appear there is quite immense. Beyond just its size, however, I believe it ought to be long enough for its northern part to be above the equator, while its southern part ought to be below it. That is because very rarely, Beroth, an exclusive desert dweller, can in fact wander into the woods near Moga village, which would imply that there is some area on the island warm and arid enough to support this species. If we again look at where the equator is, there are two islands that fulfill this criteria. Finally, in Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate, Neko the Argosy cat states, "Whole world soon be talking about brave duo of Tiger of Far East and Hero of Middle West, that you." This is likely meant as a joke, but the term Middle West does somewhat align with the western one of our two remaining candidates, as it is the western side of the continent's middle. This is, admittedly, not watertight reasoning, but at this point it could be either of these two islands, so I'm comfortable making this call, placing Moga and the deserted island here, in the island cluster south of Erude. Next up is Loklak, the online hub for Monster Hunter 3 and the last true online city in the series. This bustling trade nexus is located in a truly unique environment. It sits atop a massive rock plateau that rises from an endless sea of sand, known as the Great Desert. On top of this plateau lies a crater-like lake that Loklak is built around. And in that lake stands an enormous bone monument, believed to be the fang or horn of a gargantuan elder dragon from eons ago. Loklak City is a hub for travel and trade, and sees high volumes of traffic by air and sand ships. It is in fact such a popular layover point that the local Hunters Guild also mans a tourism office to accommodate and guide the various travelers. Every once in a while, a sandstorm envelops the area, announcing the arrival of Gen Moran, a whale-like elder dragon that swims through the Great Sands. Hollering and whooping, Loklak hunters will sound the gong and mount their sand ships, racing after the dragon in an attempt to mine the priceless ores that grow on its back. When it comes to locating Loklak, the Great Desert it sits inside of is our biggest clue. You might be tempted to look for it near our other confirmed desert areas. That is what I did in my previous mapping attempts, after all. It's however important to note that the Great Desert is unlike any other desert area in the series. Its sand is uniquely similar to water, granting no foothold and sucking in anything that falls onto it. This can be seen in-game by jumping off the sand ship during the Gen Moran hunt, but it is also specifically called out in one of the hunting magazines the player can read in Monster Hunter Portable 3rd. With that in mind, it seems likely that the Great Desert does not necessarily have to be close to the other known deserts. We do, in fact, know the location of one Great Desert. In Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate, the Caravaneer mentions that the Daren Moran, a relative of the Gen Moran that also travels by swimming through sand, also threatens Dundorma, and that it must be repelled in a Great Desert. This means that there must be a Great Desert somewhere near Dundorma, and since we know that it has swamps to the west, water to the south, and mountainous cliffs in the north, the only conclusion is that there is a Great Desert to the east of Dundorma, smack dab in the middle of the central continent. Now, the Great Desert seen in Monster Hunter 3 and the one in 4 Ultimate could, theoretically, be two different Great Deserts. Perhaps these sand seas are just a type of biome that exists in the Monster Hunter world. But in the absence of further evidence, I'd say it's best to stick to the simplest solution, which is that there is one Great Desert, and that it is here. The area seen in 4U is called the Great Desert under the jurisdiction of the Valhabar Guild in Monster Hunter 4, so perhaps this Great Desert is separated into two territories, one guarded by Loklak and one overseen by Valhabar. This location works well with other things that we know about Loklak. It is described to be accessible via sand and airships, with no mention of any kind of water-bound vessel. This implies that it has no easy access to the ocean, meaning that it would need to be quite far inland. Loklak's status as a trading and travel center also works well within this placement. Located so centrally, it would naturally be a node for nearly all journeys across the continent. By comparison, putting it on the southern peninsula near the other deserts would put it far away from most areas of interest. With all of this in mind, I believe Loklak is here, in the center of the continent, surrounded by the portion of the Great Desert that is under its jurisdiction. Moving away from Monster Hunter Tri and into Portable 3rd, we now need to find Yukumo and its adjacent hunting ground, the Misty Peaks. Nestled among tall, pill-like mountains and serene streams, this village is known for its hot springs and unique woodcrafting methods. The surrounding area is lush and beautiful, with remnants of a much larger settlement scattered around. What this community might have been, and what happened to it, has however been lost to time. Placing Yukumo is again somewhat tricky. A hunting magazine in Portable 3rd mentions that it is far to the east of Loklak, which is already a valuable clue. Monster Hunter Rise Complete Works confirms that Kamura Village is located on the main continent, and that Yukumo is near Kamura. So we can rule out Funron or any other landmasses. Yukumo is on the main continent. Beyond this, however, we have to rely on context clues. Climate-wise, Yukumo seems quite mild, with green trees and ample grass. Looking at this, it doesn't strike me as an overly northern landscape. It is, however, also distinctly not tropical. so we can limit its possible location to east of Loklak, south of Poke, and north of Jumbo. We can additionally narrow it down by considering that Yukumo is a mountain village. It must thus be located somewhere on these mountain ranges. In the absence of further evidence, I will choose to place Yukumo and the Misty Peaks here. Not too north, not too south, definitely east. Moving on, we must now discuss Tanzia, the online hub from Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate. This lively port town is a vital travel node for all manner of seafaring vessels, guiding them through the many various signal towers that litter the area around it. The largest of these towers is called the Dragon's Bane Lighthouse, and was erected long ago after Tanzia banded together to repel a powerful black sea dragon. For a mapping project like this, Tanzia is essentially a nightmare scenario. It only exists in a single game, and mostly functions as a way to replace Loklak. It only has a handful of NPCs, many of which only speak in purely functional dialogue. Its only lore entry is in Encyclopedia 4, which is notoriously sparse on actually useful information. And aside from the open sea, only very little is actually visible of the immediate environments. But nonetheless, let's make the most of what we got. In the animated film Monster Hunter Legends of the Guild, Guild Knight Julius mentions that Port Tanzia was one of the towns from which the fleets of the New World Research Commission departed to the new continent. This by itself tells us very little. We have no idea what direction the New World is in, and a port doesn't have to align perfectly with its destination. It does, however, confirm that Tanzia is a port on the open ocean, which lets us rule out the Geocroc Sea at least. Next, we are told in Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate that travel between Moga and Tanzia is straightforward but long. This would imply that Tanzia is somewhere that can be reached from Moga without too many complex maneuvers, but that it is still some distance away from it. Looking around Tanzia itself, we can see green mountains behind it, which does seem to confirm that this port is actually built onto a landmass and isn't just a floating rock or suspended raft in the middle of the ocean. Our other major clue for Tanzia's location is the Tainted Sea. This arena map, in which the player battles Dire Miralis, is explicitly stated to be near Tanzia, as the dragon's appearance presents a threat to the region. In fact, you can even see Tanzia's light towers in the distance. Now, if we look closely at these towers in both Tanzia and the Tainted Sea, it doesn't look like the Tainted Sea is opposite Tanzia. Instead, it appears as if these towers line the shore of whatever coast Tanzia is on, a pattern they seem to repeat in the Tainted Sea map. To me, this almost looks like Tanzia and the Tainted Sea are in fact jutting out of the same shoreline, rather than sitting at opposite shores. Now, looking at the rocks in the Tainted Sea, they definitely remind me of volcanic cliffs, with that sheer drop-off and that compounded rock structure. I am not a geologist and this is not a whole lot to go off of, but we don't exactly have a lot more to work with. So let's take this as an indication that the Tainted Sea shore might be either near or at a volcanic region. Now, if the Tainted Sea and Tanzia are indeed on the same shoreline, we need to find a shore that would include both green mountainous terrain as well as volcanic rock. My best guess for this would be here, where the shores of the Arcolis and Erude regions meet. Erude is the only place in the old world with confirmed volcanic activity, and lots of it at that. Meanwhile, the region around the Geocroc Sea's west and southwest are adjacent to places that we know to be fairly green, such as the Old Jungle and Metapitat. This placement also allows for straightforward but lengthy travel with Moga. It would also be a decent way to get hunters from Dundorma onto the open ocean and on their way to the New World, although admittedly having to sail south to circumvent much of the continent does seem inefficient. But considering what we know, I choose to place Tanzia here. This covers us for all settlements in the 3rd generation, and in locating them, we've also placed a handful of hunting grounds already. Let's do the remaining ones now. As we already have the deserted island, our next target is the Sandy Plains hunting ground. This arid region is full of slopes and canyons, which all serve to hide various old buildings and traces of settlements in their shadows. It is clear that people once lived here, and the guild has various theories as to why they might have left. But now, only monsters roam these plains and its small, muddy oases. As far as mapping goes, the Sandy Plains has the advantage of appearing in 2 separate generations, 3rd and 5th. This gives us loads of information to work with. For starters, Monster Hunter Rise Complete Works describes the Sandy Plains as sitting atop a rock plateau that juts out from a vast sandy desert, similar to Loklak. That same passage even mentions that the hunting ground must be reached via sand ship. It also states that the Sandy Plains are somewhat distant from Kamura, but still within the same region. And because we already know that Yukumo and Kamura are quite close to each other, we can essentially treat any statements regarding vicinity to Kamura as also applying more or less to Yukumo. This gives us a rough range of where we might put the Sandy Plains. If we now go into the map and look at it closely, a thing that immediately jumps out at me is how much greener it is compared to the old and Gen 2 deserts. This is, of course, subjective, but in my opinion this does open up the possibility of the Sandy Plains being further north and adjacent to a milder climate than the other desert maps. Combine this with the mention of a vast sandy desert below the Plains Plateau, and I think the likeliest position for it is here, at the eastern edge of the Great Desert. The mention of sand ships being needed to access the hunting ground does fit with it being connected to the Great Desert, and this location is both far from Yukumo but in the same rough region. All in all, it seems to fulfill all criteria that we established, so I am confident in placing it here. Moving on, we reach another 3rd gen hunting ground that returned in Monster Hunter Rise, the Flooded Forest. This humid area consists of a forest that has been partially submerged by a swelling river, creating aquatic habitats for various monsters and unique plants. Ruins litter the place, and the guild first became interested in the area after a rare mineral was discovered within the flooding river. Both the Monster Hunter Rise book and the hunting magazine and Portable 3rd confirm and reiterate that the flooding body of water in this map is a river, meaning that it does not need to be near a coast. Looking around the borders of the map in Rise also seems to show that it is surrounded by land, so I'd comfortably place it somewhere inland. Hunter's Encyclopedia 3 calls the surrounding area a tropical wetland, so it's safe to assume that this region is pretty far south. Monster Hunter Rise Complete Works then again confirms that the Flooded Forest is in the vicinity of Kamura and thus also near Yukumo. Based on the fact that the Sandy Plains were described as somewhat distant but in the same region, while the Flooded Forest is said to just be in the vicinity, I believe the Flooded Forest is closer to Kamura, and thus Yukumo, than the Sandy Plains are. This is already all the info we get, so now it's just a matter of placing it, which I will do here. This way, it is south enough to be tropical, it's closer to Yukumo than the Sandy Plains, and as an added bonus, it is decently easy to reach from Moga just looking at it. Next up, we have the 3rd generation Tundra. This frigid wasteland is described as a place where life and death stand still. The cold devours all ambition, halts every movement. Only the toughest monsters prowl here, and it is said that there is a hidden wyvern graveyard somewhere in this region. As a hunting ground that is entirely exclusive to 3rd Gen, the tundra is a tough one to pin down. Hunter's Encyclopedia 3 specifies that there are colder known areas in the world than this one, which implies that while the tundra is obviously in the north somewhere, it isn't the furthest north point of the old world. That is pretty much already all the useful information we get from the books. Time to actually look at the region. Walking through the tundra, one thing that sticks out is the lack of vegetation. There are a handful of sparse trees in the southwest, but the majority of the area is completely barren. Compare this with the Snowy Mountains hunting ground, where all the zones that aren't on the mountain peak are quite green, with ample vegetation and hints of a boreal forest. This is naturally a subjective call, but I think we can use this as a hint towards the tundra being at least further north than the Snowy Mountains. Looking around the tundra further, it appears to be entirely surrounded by mountains, with no obvious sea access. However, by the camp we can see this river carrying icebergs, flowing southwest. Rivers generally flow towards the ocean one way or another, so unless this river snakes around deceptively, which is possible, we could conclude from this that there is an ocean coast somewhere to the southwest of this hunting ground. I elect to place the 3rd Gen tundra here, on this little bit of shoreline that juts out to the northwest of the Snowy Mountains. Not only does this location seemingly fulfill the criteria we established, it also puts it directly north of Loklak, which would, presumably, make travel by airship simpler. The final location for this generation is the 3rd Gen volcano. This area is defined by a massive active volcano sitting in the middle of an old forest, creating a harsh divide between normal and extreme habitats. A community known as the Fire Country is known to live somewhere around here, and occasionally commissions quests from the Hunters Guild. Like the tundra, the volcano is also entirely unique to 3rd Gen, and thus suffers from a lack of sources. However, there are some juicy tidbits. Hunter's Encyclopedia 3 describes this volcano as standing in an ancient forest, and that it is quite a lonely region. Coupled with the fact that we can only visually see a single volcano in-game, we can reasonably conclude that this is in fact a lonesome volcano, rather than one of an entire volcanic mountain range. Additionally, in Monster Hunter Portable 3rd, the Yukumo chief mentions that she once lost her way home and ended up near the volcano. This might imply that the volcano is also in the rough vicinity of Yukumo. Let's take a look at the region in-game now. By looking around, we can observe that the hunting ground is surrounded by an open shore on the west, a forest in the south, and indistinct land masses to the north and northeast. There are also no volcanoes in sight beside the main one. With all of this in mind, I choose to place the 3rd Gen volcano here, on this shore gazing at Erude. The fact that this volcano stands by itself tells me that it probably isn't on Erude proper, but with how volcanic activity in this world seems to be so concentrated in that area, I also do not want to place it too far away. With this spot, it's near Erude, but not in it. It's also near Yukumo, and borders on a western shore while also having warmer green regions to its southeast and east, fitting with the placement of its forest. And with that, we have mapped all major locations introduced in the 3rd generation of Monster Hunter. This is what our map currently looks like. As you just saw, we are now at the point where we have to heavily rely on assumptions and judgment calls. This will continue as we go on. You can surely also see that it's a bit of a house of cards. Since we have to place loads of locations in relation to each other, being wrong about any one of them can in turn make the entire map fall apart. I am so far quite confident in all of these placements, but if in the future something does inarguably disprove any of this, I'll definitely have to do an update. That's the benefit of doing this as a series after all. Today, we take on what is maybe the biggest hurdle to mapping Monster Hunter: the 4th generation games, which are Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate and Generations Ultimate. Not only do these games together introduce the greatest number of in-game locations yet, they also suffer from having very little official lore about them. The lore book of Monster Hunter 4 is notoriously cagey compared to previous entries, and Generations Ultimate did not even get a bespoke book. This is going to be quite challenging, and I must stress anew that these placements will inherently be based on assumptions and guesswork, indicated with a little red star icon, to differentiate them from places that do have a hard confirmed location. Alright, enough delaying, time to get started. Luckily, this time, we actually have 2 completely confirmed locations that we can get out of the way first. If you recall, Hunter's Encyclopedia 2, which is the main source for all confirmed map locations, also confirmed that this crescent island here is Shiki, the land of Wyverians. Hunter's Encyclopedia 4, in turn, directly states that the village of Cathar, which we visit in Monster Hunter 4, is in fact on this island. While we don't get an exact location, we know it's somewhere on there. From this, we can also glean the location of a hunting ground, the Heaven's Mount. In its brief description in Encyclopedia 4, it is stated that Cathar village sits at the base of this mountain. I realize this is something that is also communicated in-game, but come on, it does feel nice to have a book source for it as well. Either way, this allows us to comfortably place Heaven's Mount on Shiki as well, right around Cathar. But this is all the hard confirmations we get. Now is the hour for speculation and deduction. As usual, we will first start with towns. The first town location the player encounters in Monster Hunter 4 is Valhabar, a lively merchant's gathering. This place cannot be found on any maps, because Valhabar is a traveling city, changing locations regularly as the merchants follow the gathering hub the town is centralized around. It is a place of hunting, trade, and entertainment. Now, first things first. Yes, Valhabar does technically not have any set location, as it travels around. What we will try to determine is thus simply its location during the events of Monster Hunter 4. There is some evidence to suggest that the town stops by this area regularly though. Hunter's Encyclopedia 4 mentions that Valhabar has a deep relationship with the Daren Moran, a giant desert dragon that the village often seeks out in times of festivity, which often leads them to this general region. It is this relationship that gives us our first few clues as to Valhabar's location. During the intro of Monster Hunter 4, a Daren Moran attacks ships heading to the town, and only barely stops short of destroying it. From this scene, we discover that Valhabar is near a great desert and has sea access. The latter is also verbally confirmed by dialogue from the Valhabar Master, who appears in Monster Hunter Generations Ultimate as a side character. Now, if you recall last episode, we asserted that the Great Desert seen in Monster Hunter 3 and the one seen in Monster Hunter 4 are actually the same desert, simply separated into 2 distinct jurisdictions, based on how the Great Desert descriptions is worded in Hunter's Encyclopedia 4, and the fact that the Daren Moran can attack both Valhabar and Dundorma. Reminder, this is an assumption on my part, and not at all confirmed. But using this as a springboard, we can narrow Valhabar's location down to being somewhere near its own Great Desert territory, which itself must be near the 3rd Gen Great Desert. Looking at the cutscene where the Daren Moran nearly crashes into the city, we can see that Valhabar is essentially sandwiched between desert and sea. Considering that, this spot right here seems to fit really well. It is centrally located, which would be great as a regular spot for a merchant town, and has access to both desert and sea. Note that the shape and size of the Valhabar Great Desert shown here is entirely hypothetical. We really have no idea about that. Also worth reminding you that this is the case for all hunting grounds. The colored areas are just approximation of where it might be, not how big it actually is. Next up, we have Hearth, the only village in the series where we get to meet Trovarians, a race of mole-like people that all excel at metalwork and blacksmithing. Hearth is built into a volcanic mountainscape, and the lava that flows through this region is used to power the forges and machines of the Trovarians. This town is adjacent to the volcanic hollow hunting ground. Now, if you've been watching the previous episodes, you know what I'm about to say. Volcanic activity in the old world? Oh boy, that sounds like Erude. Lucky for me, there is actually a decent amount of evidence to suggest that Hearth and the volcanic hollow are in fact on or near my favorite volcanic peninsula. They both need to be somewhat close to Valhabar, as the caravan our hunter joins in Monster Hunter 4 gets there by land in what appears to be a fairly reasonable amount of travel time. In the cutscene that shows their arrival in Hearth, we get a pretty good look at the surroundings. Hearth and the Hollow seem to border on a curving seashore and a mountain range extending away from the direction the caravan is approaching from. This alone already gives us a pretty good possible spot for this village, being here at the bend of the Erude Peninsula. This is already my best guess, to be quite honest. No book or in-game dialogue I could find gives us any new clues, so I am comfortable putting it here. Now we move our attention to Chico Sands, an odd corner of the world where a gaggle of felines live in a tropical paradise, led by a shipwrecked Wyverian lady. A small nearby island called Sunsnug Isle is home to numerous feline activities. Chico is another one of these places that we simply do not get a ton of information on. It's a tropical place bathed in sunshine, so it's probably more to the south. We also know that it is close to the Primal Forest hunting ground, as Little Miss Forge mentions that one of the felines from Chico enjoys going on nightly walks near that forest. This is relevant both because it allows us to place both the town and the hunting ground in one fell swoop, but also because it relates to another statement made in the game. The High Questatrix in Valhabar says at one point, when sending the player to the Primal Forest, that it is a long ride to get there, implying that the Primal Forest, and thus Chico, is far away from Valhabar. As far as statements go, this is already all that we get. But we can dig a little deeper by considering the plot of Monster Hunter 4. Once our caravan gets their ship built, they attempt to travel from Hearth to Cathar by sea. Considering where we put Hearth on our map, and where we know Cathar to be, we can surmise that their sea route would have looked something like this. Now, this does not go to plan obviously, and after some Gormagala related sea trouble, the ship has to make landfall in Chico to recover and regroup. This means that Chico is, in all likelihood, somewhere along this path. This is where we just kind of have to make a decision, and I choose to put Chico and the adjacent primal forest here, on the western coast of the southeastern chunk of the continent. As we already know where Cathar is, we can immediately jump to the only village introduced in Monster Hunter Generations, which is also the last town we have to cover today. Burna is a small hunting town conjoined with the Wycademy, a research institute that collaborates closely with the Hunters Guild. The Wycademy originally ventured into this area to investigate an ancient limestone mine, which turned out to actually be fossilized remains of a gargantuan monster. As the Wycademy increased its efforts and pulled in more workers to help in this landmark investigation, researchers and hunters began settling down nearby, eventually forming the settlement that is now known as Burna. The rugged mountain terrain used to make travel here quite difficult, but breakthroughs in airship technology have recently made it extremely easy to move to and from this town. Full honesty here. I thought Burna was genuinely gonna be impossible to place. Generations Ultimate never received a bespoke lorebook, and all the info we have on it is from a single interview in Principles of Creativity 2, which barely says anything of note about the lore of this place. The landscape is non-distinct, and game dialogue doesn't address its location in any meaningful way beyond simply saying that airship travel has made it very accessible. I was actually kind of close on giving up on this whole project altogether, when Jiu finally threw me a bone. In the description for the quest, Travelers in Trouble, we learn that a group of travelers who were going from Burna to Dondorma were attacked by Ioprey in the marshlands, which is Jiu's name for the Gen 2 swamp. Now, because we know where the marshlands and Dondorma are, we can figure out Burna's rough location. Remember, the Gen 2 swamp and the city of Dondorma are not placed here because of my assumptions. They are explicitly put here on the map that we see in Encyclopedia 2. Looking at these two confirmed points, the only way for this quest description to make sense is if the travelers were approaching Dondorma from the west, as they would otherwise not have any real reason to be going through the marshlands. This means that, surprisingly, Burna is actually probably near the Shrade region. We know that the town is surrounded by mountains, and while there could be many mountain ranges that are simply not indicated, I'll choose to stick with the mountains we see drawn on this map, which are just copied exactly from the Encyclopedia 2 map. I think Burna goes here on the map, nestled between mountains and roughly on the same latitude as Kokoto. I chose this spot because I can imagine there being mountain passes and the like that lead to Dondorma via taking a path through the marshlands. Being online with Kokoto also fits the general climate we see in Burna. Not 100% sure of this, but frankly, considering I thought this town was gonna kill the map project entirely, this is good enough for me. Now that we have all of the towns, it's time to move on to the hunting grounds. First up is the Ancestral Steppe, the first hunting ground seen in Monster Hunter 4. It is an open grassland surrounding a cluster of mountains, with various ancient red ruins embedded into the landscape. Like many starting maps, the Ancestral Steppe is given a vague location by the game and book and is described to be quite close to the starting village, in this case Valhabar. How close and in what direction though, that is for us to figure out. There is not a ton to go off of, but if we jump into the map and look around, we can notice that there are large mountains visible to the west and the south. One way to make this work is if the Ancestral Steppe is to the west of Valhabar, with the mountains being part of the same range that makes up the volcanic belt of Erude. Thus, I am gonna mark a fairly large area as a possible location here. The steppe being to the west of Valhabar also synergizes well with the next hunting ground we have to cover, which would be the Everwood, a mysterious area full of ancient ruins and unique monsters. This hunting ground is special in that the map layout is different every time the player travels there, adding to its mystery. Many powerful and rare monsters, such as the Orochi Kirin, can be found here. As you might expect from a place meant to be confusing, there is zero info on the forest location as far as the books are concerned, and Monster Hunter 4 itself is also quite cagey about confirming anything about it. However, thanks to one guardsman, we can actually place it on the map with some degree of confidence. In Dundorma, a city guardian will complain about a Yangaruga that has been spotted in the outskirts of Dundorma and ask the player to handle it for him. The resulting quest then takes the player to, drumroll please, the Everwood. This means that this hunting ground has to be close to Dundorma in order to be considered part of, or at least adjacent to, its outskirts. Now, I choose to place it here, to the southeast of the city, near the Great Desert and extending towards the Ancestral Steppe. This adds 2 layers of stability to our assumption. In Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate, the Everwood was updated to rarely include desert zones, which one could tie into its proximity to the Great Desert near Dundorma. And the ruins found in the Everwood seem visually kind of related to these found in the Ancestral Steppe, so I could imagine that whatever civilization left them behind could have stretched from the Geocrux Sea all the way down to the steppe. This is just theorizing on my part though, but then again, so is most of this video series. Moving on, we now have to tackle the Frozen Seaway. This frigid area is a frozen hellscape ruled over by monsters like the Zamtrios, a place where only the strong survive. Whirlpools surround the frozen sheets that make up this hunting ground. This is another one of those locations that nearly made me give up entirely. You might think that, hey, it's clearly an Arctic region, so at least we know that it should be up north, right? And I am so sorry, but that is actually not the case. The Frozen Seaway is described, both in-game and in the books, as a place that was not originally cold. Instead, it is said to have suddenly turned into a frozen waste near instantly a long time ago, during what the Guildmarm describes as a freak weather event. You can see remnants of this in the map. There are massive waves that were frozen solid mid-crash, and the feline settlement of the hunting ground shows glimpses of what this area once looked like. This is fascinating and also very, very bad for us. The Frozen Seaway could literally be anywhere. It could be an island or even a tiny, unmarked rock in the open sea that was transformed by whatever happened here. However, I did not give up hope, and with the help of our local lore master Ban Lagiacrus, was able to find a few scattered clues. This hunting ground also appears in Monster Hunter Generations Ultimate, where it will sometimes be inhabited by Gammoth. This massive monster cannot fly, and also does not display the ability to burrow, nor would I assume that it can create ice platforms solid enough for its heavy body to stand on. In short, I see no way in which a Gammoth could cross an ocean. Its presence here might thus imply that the Seaway is at least not a full island, and is somewhat connected to the mainland. For our next clue, we return to Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate, in which the quest, Advanced, Chumming the Waters, tasks us with killing 2 Zamtrios in the frozen seaway, because they were preying on and scaring away all the best fish on Sunsnug Isle. This quest is in fact necessary to unlock Green Plesioth in the fishing minigame. Now, the only way this makes any sense is if the frozen seaway is somewhat close to Sunsnug and thus Chico, since that's the only way in which killing these 2 specific Zamtrios would solve this issue. This does make a degree of sense, since the frozen seaway is only unlocked in the story after reaching Chico. Our final piece of evidence is again a visual observation. If we hop into the seaway map, we can notice that a large green landmass is visible in the south. Considering all of the clues, I choose to place the frozen seaway here, jutting out at the western shore of the southernmost tip of the continent. The landmass seen in the south of the hunting ground would thus be our first ever glimpse of the shores of Aya. Alright, we are all done with Monster Hunter 4. All that is left now is the hunting grounds introduced in Generations and Generations Ultimate, which are luckily only 2. The first one is the Jurassic Frontier, a land stuck in the ancient past. Long extinct plants grow into a dense landscape here, and unique monsters such as the Glavenus roam it. In its deepest depths, spores float eerily through the air. As another starting hunting ground, the Jurassic Frontier is often assumed to be near Berna, the starting town. This is, however, not the case. It was specifically confirmed during Monster Hunter Festa 2016 that the Jurassic Frontier is quite far from Berna, taking several days of airship travel to reach. Moreover, it was also revealed during the same event that the frontier is actually an island, which was inaccessible until recently due to strong currents in the surrounding oceans. As far as direct information goes, this is already all that we get. We can, however, glean a few more clues from an arena map which is conjoined to the Jurassic Frontier. Wyvern's End is the area in which players fight Nakarkos, and is confirmed in-game to be somewhere on the Jurassic Frontier island. Do we have more information on this area then? Of course not, but there is one detail about its main tenant that can help us. In Principles of Creativity 2, it was revealed that Nakarkos are such powerful predators that they will sometimes even hunt Cedius down in the watery depths. This is relevant in that the main habitat of Cedius, as far as we know, is the underwater ruin network under the deserted island. This prey-predator relationship might thus imply that the Jurassic Frontier island is near Moga Island, being part of this same conspicuous cluster of islands. I do not think we can get any more precise than this, so I will simply place the Jurassic Frontier on this little island here, as it looks small enough that a couple of ocean currents could entirely cut it off from the outside world. Finally, we must now locate the Ruined Pinnacle. This recently discovered hunting ground is characterized by an enormous, spire-like mountain peak that serves as the nesting grounds for Valstrax, a mysterious elder dragon that had long been considered extinct. Ruins litter the area, standing as remnants of a civilization that once lived here. This was another extremely tough case, as the Ruined Pinnacle does not get any dedicated section in any of the lore books because GU doesn't have one. We do, however, get a few breadcrumbs that will carry us to victory. In the intro cutscene for Valstrax, we can see it hunting Ludroth in what looks like the open ocean before zooming to its nest in the subsequent shot, which might imply that the pinnacle is somewhere near water. We can, however, also assume that the ruined pinnacle is not an island, due to statements made in one of the Principles of Creativity 2 interviews. In it, Daisuke Chihara, director of Generations Ultimate, specifically states that the monsters found in the lower areas of the pinnacle hunting ground visit the area from surrounding regions. This matters because two of the monsters that can appear on this map are Arzuros and Kongalala, which are likely unable to cross large swaths of open ocean. Thus, I feel comfortable assuming that the ruined pinnacle is part of a larger landmass but near a shoreline. Arzuros and Kongalala are both heavily associated with the specific hunting ground that they debuted in, Arzuros with the Misty Peaks and Kongalala with the Gen 2 jungle. I realize this is not watertight reasoning, but this aspect does compel me to place the ruined pinnacle somewhere on the main continent. But where exactly? A huge element of the design of the ruined pinnacle is the presence of ruins. Nearly every zone has some kind of ancient architecture present. Given that, perhaps we should place the pinnacle somewhere we know of other ruins existing, as it could have maybe been part of a larger network of ancient cultures. One possible candidate would be to put it near the Everwood and Ancestral Steppe, as we already established that this area would likely have a large belt of ruins. I, however, don't think it fits here, for one reason. While the ruined pinnacle was clearly inhabited by humans or Wyverians at some point, the ruins themselves were only discovered recently as of the events of Generations Ultimate. Considering how spectacular the pinnacle is, it only having been newly found implies to me that it is located far away from any current settlements. That is why I would not put it near the Everwood or Ancestral Steppe. There are now quite a few inhabited areas around there. Instead, I think the best place for it would be here, south of the Gen 2 jungle. This place fulfills all our established criteria and is, as a bonus, decently close to both the Gen 2 jungle and the Misty Peaks, further enabling Arzuros and Kongalala migrations. And with that, we have our Monster Hunter world map updated to include all major Gen 4 locations. As I am sure you could tell, this was by far the largest challenge yet, as this generation suffered from an overall vagueness both in-game and in books regarding the wider world. Subsequently, some of the assumptions we made are a little braver than I would usually feel comfortable with, but I do think we did the best we could with what we had. And so, we reach the end of this journey, as we must now make the final additions to our map. The locations introduced in Monster Hunter World, Monster Hunter Rise, and Monster Hunter Wilds. You might be surprised to see me include Wilds here instead of giving it a bespoke mapping episode. The reason for this is that there isn't actually much to figure out in Wilds. The game's world is entirely interconnected, and thanks to the in-game map menu, we know pretty much exactly where these locations are in relation to each other. There is only a single question that we need to answer about Wilds, but we'll get to that at the end. Before we jump in, we have to make one last correction. In the previous episode, we discussed the locations of towns seen in Monster Hunter 4, which included Chico Sands. A few of you were surprised when I placed it on the mainland, as many fans commonly assume it to be on an island. I was myself curious where that belief might have started, and after some back and forth, commenter Eternal4651 pointed out that a villager request from Generations Ultimate appears to link Chico Sands to the island region around Moga. In this request, a horde of daimyo hermitors is tearing up the deserted island, which stops the felines from Chico from fishing in the area. This would seem to confirm that Chico is perhaps even on the same island as Moga. But is that really the case? One thing to keep in mind is that the felines of Chico go on their gathering missions in the surrounding regions in little boats, traveling some distance for each task. The precise wording of the request is somewhat ambiguous about if the fishing spot in question is actually adjacent to Chico or if it's just a place the felines travel to for fishing. So while I don't think this confirms Chico being on an island, it does make me reconsider my placement of Moga. If you recall, at the end of our deductions, we had to basically roll the dice on which one of these two islands was Moga. Considering that we now have evidence of some proximity to Chico, I think I chose poorly, and will thus relocate Moga and the deserted island hunting ground over here, such that it would be feasibly reachable by boat from Chico. Thanks again to everyone who helped out with this. Alright, that is it for corrections, time to get started properly. Monster Hunter World kicked off the 5th generation with a bang by taking place on a completely new continent called the New World. Luckily, the game also came with its own world map, redrawn here by yours truly. Our luck doesn't end here. While previous games sometimes had highly stylized map menus that were mostly useless for our purposes, World just showed us exactly where each hunting ground and town is. So, let's just add those here real quick. If only all of this would have been this easy. One thing worth mentioning here is that while I drew it as a sort of peninsula here, it isn't actually entirely clear how the guiding lands connect to the continent. So since all the locations on the continent are already taken care of, we can focus on the main question. Where is the New World continent in relation to the Old World? First things first. If we take a look at our Old World map, you might notice or remember this conspicuous western continent here. As I said in the very first episode of this series, this landmass is unique in that it is never acknowledged in any book or game, and has only ever appeared in the Hunter's Encyclopedia 2 world map. Now, I have seen some people propose that this might be an early depiction of the New World. After all, we are told in Monster Hunter World, the official complete works, that the guild had known about the existence of the New World for a long time. And while you are of course free to have your own interpretations of this world, I actually think this is not the continent we are looking for. First of all, it is way too close. The World Book specifically calls the New World a place far, far away. Meanwhile, this unnamed continent is as close to the mainland as Funrun, which is a continent hunters travel to without too much trouble when taking on quests in locations such as the Great Forest. Comparing that to how travel to the New World is depicted as this arduous and long trip, I think this proximity alone already disqualifies the Western continent. Additionally, if we look closely at that original world map, we can notice ship routes that go from the Shrade region to this continent. This also seems to disqualify it, because while the New World was known about for a long time, it was also considered entirely inaccessible until the First Fleet made it there, thanks to advances in seafaring technology. Before that, distance and weather conditions isolated the New World from any explorers. So, looking at the evidence, I think we can discard this continent as a candidate. I do, however, think we are going in the right direction. My assumption is that the New World continent is west-northwest of the Old World, so far away that it does not show up on this map. I base this assumption on two main reasons. 1. During the Fatalis story event in Monster Hunter World, the Research Commission is summoned to the Old World, which they travel to by boat. Their specific target is Castle Shrade, a place that we have a confirmed location for. Now, notably, we only see them on a boat for this journey, so assuming they were able to get to Castle Shrade just by taking a boat and without any ridiculous detours, it might indicate that they approached from the west and were able to dock directly in the Shrade region. The second piece of evidence is even stronger. In the Monster Hunter World lorebook, we get this graphic showing the Research Commission's path to the New World, which clearly shows them arriving from the east. We know for a fact that this map is north aligned thanks to the compass icon here. So with these factors in mind, I think we can place the New World here. Now, I do want to note that in the Netflix movie Legends of the Guild, we do get a few references to the New World that seem to indicate that it is actually east. The travel log at the start of the film seems to show Zora Magdaros and the Commission as eastward bound, and the animated exposition about the Elder Crossing has Elder Dragons fly to the east. Frankly, this seems completely contradictory to the graphic we get in the book, and I think this is a case where you simply have to choose for yourself what you think and how you reconcile these conflicts. Personally, I am more than comfortable ignoring the movie in this case, and giving the game and book preferential treatment. So while this doesn't change where I'd place the New World on the map, I still wanted to mention it so that you can come to your own conclusions, perhaps differing to mine. And just like that, we can move on to Monster Hunter Rise. While World gave us an in-game map of an entirely new world, Rise kept things more old school, and was generally very vague about its locations. But that is just part of this project, so we will soldier on. First up, we have Kamura Village, the main town of Rise. Renowned for its metalworks, Kamura is a small but heavily defended village, with various fortresses surrounding its perimeter. This is no mere paranoia, for a devastating stampede of monsters nearly extinguished this community many years ago. If you watched the episode on the 3rd generation games, then you might already know that the Rise book explicitly mentions that Kamura is near Yukumo. This makes sense, as they share both cultural and environmental similarities. But that is already all that we get in terms of direct info. Neither the game nor the book give any extra details that we could use as clues. So while we know it's somewhere around here, we can't really pinpoint it yet. To reach the truth, we ironically have to place it together with 3 other locations all at once: Elgato, the Citadel, and the Kingdom, for those who have not played Sunbreak. The Citadel is a multi-biome hunting ground that contains the ruins of an old castle town. This region is the territory of a nation only ever called the Kingdom, which establishes an outpost called Elgato to monitor the movements of monsters that led to the destruction of the Citadel. I cannot stress enough how, out of every location in this series, these 3 were by far the most convoluted and annoying to try and figure out. I spent God knows how much time discussing, arguing, and investigating these places with the help of many wonderful community members, and by the end of it, we were going a little insane. But after trying every angle, from analyzing in-game textures to using monster habitat ranges for deduction, we discovered that the answer was actually right under our noses the whole time. Namely, buried in Sunbreak's lorebook. The Monster Hunter books sometimes come with a plot summary section at the very end, recapping the narrative of the respective game for people who just mashed through the dialogue. These chapters tend to be overlooked by many, myself included, because they very rarely contain a ton of new info. But, hiding among the plot summary of Sunbreak, there is this graphic. Now, if we quickly translate and redraw it for your convenience, you will see that this is a stylized map diagram showing how Kamura, the Citadel, Elgato, and the Kingdom relate to each other in space. It shows that the 4 locations essentially form a line. Kamura is firmly on the mainland, while the Citadel and Elgato are on a curved peninsula. The Kingdom itself is located on an island off the coast of that peninsula. This narrows down the possible locations of Kamura significantly. We now just have to find a place that is both close to Yukumo and that allows for this specific arrangement to exist. Initially, a ton of people who were aware of this graphic arranged Kamura to the south, turning the diagram by 90 degrees and having Elgato essentially be the southernmost tip of the continent. This seemed particularly attractive, as it fueled the idea that the kingdom that we help out in Sunbreak is in fact the long-teased nation of Aya, which was mentioned to be on this southern landmass way back in Hunter's Encyclopedia 2. And if this is how you want to interpret the world, that is fine. But I disagree, because of the Citadel. Climate zones are a little scuffed in Monster Hunter, but even so, the Citadel seems to be designed as a distinctly northern region. It consists of a taiga forest transitioning into a snowy mountain range, full with frozen caves and peaks. Placing a zone like this south of Jumbo just doesn't make sense to me. Instead, I think these 4 locations go here. Kamura to the northeast of Yukumo, with the Citadel and Elgato on this bend of the coast bordering on the small island where I'd place the kingdom. This puts the Citadel in a place that I think makes more sense, and still fulfills all the needed criteria. While I agree the kingdom being Aya would be really cool, Aya is a massive landmass. Considering the kingdom seems to be in a bit of a rough state during the events of Sunbreak, and requests the guild's help, I think their homeland being on the smaller side, and thus having fewer resources, feels a little more appropriate. But again, this all depends on where you place Yukumo anyway, so nothing is really set in stone. And so, after placing 4 locations in one fell swoop, and having already determined the locations of 2 of the hunting grounds in Rise, we are left with 3 more hunting grounds to figure out. The Shrine Ruins are a collection of ruined temple buildings nestled in a mountain valley, with deep scars that tell of a calamity that shook the region. This is another very easy location to place. It is explicitly stated to be near Kamura, and is part of the same mountain chain. So I'd say we just place it here. The Frost Islands are a frigid collection of small islands in a cold sea, covered in snow and tormented by storms. Ferocious creatures roam here, and the decaying skull of a massive dragon alongside a shipwreck are the final witnesses of an epic battle that took place here long ago. This hunting ground is a little tougher to pin down. For starters, as an ice map, the immediate instinct is, of course, to place it somewhere in the north. The Rise book seems to support that, with a very intense passage describing the cold. Stepping into that land, it was as if the idea of heat itself had been erased from the world. This is a very strong description, especially if we compare it to the one about the 3rd generation tundra in Hunter's Encyclopedia 3. So I'm quite comfortable putting it somewhere north. But where? The book gives us some more hints. The Frost Islands are part of an archipelago, that is to say, an island chain. Moreover, the zone we visit is specifically located in the center of such a chain, which is why ocean waves don't reach it. As that is all we get, I'm going to place the Frost Islands here, north of the tundra and behind this larger island. That way, I can imagine that the arrangement of the island and the larger continent to the north of it would allow the Frost Islands to avoid wavefall, which would fit with what we are told in the book. The final hunting ground from Rise that we must cover are the lava caverns. This is a volcanic area, with flooded cave systems that create a dichotomous landscape of fire and water. Various ruins litter the place, now inhabited mostly by felines and mealinxes. This is the last singular hunting ground we must place in this series, and so, naturally, it is a bit of a pain. The Rise book gives us 2 facts about the lava caverns that are relevant here. For one, it is reached by boat. Fair enough, that is even visible in-game. Second, it includes an odd paragraph about how while the caverns have a similar ecosystem to Kamura, which is why one finds wirebugs here, they are actually not that close to the village. And that is pretty much it. Seeing as our only real criteria is access to water and distance to Kamura, I think we can pull out the all-reliable and place the lava caverns on the Erude Peninsula, the only place in the old world with confirmed volcanic activity. This specific placement puts the hunting ground further away from Kamura than the sandy plains and flooded forest, which were both stated to be somewhat close to the village by comparison. But the caverns still remain in the general region of influence that we have established for Kamura. And with that, we have placed every single location from the 1st to 5th generations of Monster Hunter. Which means there is only one question left to answer. Where does Wilds take place? The region that we visit during the events of Monster Hunter Wilds is initially called the Forbidden Lands, but is renamed into the Eastlands during the story. With a name like that, and considering that the characters keep mentioning that they are going east, we can safely assume that this region is, surprise, somewhere in the east. One placement for the Forbidden Lands that I have seen suggested by fans is here, in the central east of the mainland. I, however, disagree with this placement, and not just because it messes with the map we've established so far. In fact, let's quickly revert our map to only include 100% confirmed locations. Do you see the problem? We know for a fact that hunters travel through this region, either when they go from Jumbo to the Snowy Mountains, or from Poke to the Terosu jungle. This really doesn't fit with what we have been told about the Forbidden Lands, which were completely cut off from access by outsiders for 1,000 years. So no, I don't think the Eastlands are here. Instead, I am going to place the events of Monster Hunter Wilds on my favorite continent, Funron, specifically in the far east portion of the landmass that we don't see on this map. I have a few reasons for that. 1. As we just disqualified the eastern chunk of the main continent, this is just the next best option. 2. We know for a fact that Funron has a massive forest area, as this is where we find the Great Forest hunting ground. And when we see the guild survey the east-west buffer zone in the prologue to Wilds, they appear to be flying over just such a dense and large forest area. And 3. If we assume that the ancient tower is on Funron, it sure does fit with the entire ancient civilization theme that the Eastlands have. As the entire region is full of ruins from the mighty city of Wyveria, the tower could well be one of them. Again, this is a judgment call that you have to make for yourselves, but I think this is where Monster Hunter Wilds goes. And we are done. This is, as of June 2025, the full map of the world of Monster Hunter as reconstructed by me. This was an extremely fun project, and I'm so glad that many of you enjoyed it alongside me. As we'll get more locations in future expansions and games, I'll gladly update this as we go. I am more than happy to do another episode to see where the locations from Monster Hunter Wilds Swampborn go. Additionally, since Wilds seems to have an interest in explicitly discussing aspects of the world and setting that were previously only implied, there is a non-zero chance that we will get an official updated world map in the inevitable Monster Hunter Wilds lorebook. If that does happen, I'll do an update video comparing how much stuff I got wrong. But for now, this is it. Thank you all so much for watching, and a huge thank you to all the people who've supported this project over its long duration. A big thank you to all the lore masters in the community who helped me out in the various Discord channels. You were all incredible, and I'm so glad we finally got it done. Of course, I would not dream to sign off without also saying a big thank you to all the people who support this channel via Patreon or YouTube channel members. I would like to especially thank Unfortunately Not Zako, British Empire, Just a Hunter, Meta Defiance, Thomas Caldecott, Autumns, Anjanath Tamer's Ambience, Wandering Soul, Stormbreaker Kai, Joshua Ellison, Uthduna is an Octopus, Chocolate Coat, Precum King, Joey Tribby 58, Makamawi, Yuriv, CJ, Carl the Crab, Christopher Bronson, Harpier, Suddenly, Molly Mockery, Rose, Zyperius Volkvar, Hamburger Discord, Zaffy, Theopuz, Lufish, Morgul Blank, Tacti Wolf, Thyla Zero, Jacob Coleman, Hellbug Hunter, Shebo, M1Have12, Regal Eagle, Wronger 97, Quali, Mad Hat 124, My Name Gone, The Dollarfish, Sheba, Ryan Hook, Veraxis, Thick, Kuroneko, Zion H.V. Augensen, Alistair in Wonderland, Jacob Denumnut, Soruka, Sir Newt Newt, Evie, Rambling Robin, Hashi, Black Ace 202, Dissy, Hubbo Himbro Mirror, Magenta Magenta, Russell, Vulgar Beast, Person 212, Claire Miboun, Oakwood Tree, Mr. Pyramid, Makot 02, Nils Schlatter, Iron Camel, and of course, Nah, I'm going to bed. Take care everyone, I'll see you around next time. Bye bye, happy hunting.